Welcome everybody to our annual ReproShabbat Lunch and Learn. So much gratitude goes to Marsha Krasner, Renee Sable, and the rest of the amazing women involved in our local NCJW for making this powerful event happen year after year. Why ReproShabbat this week? Well, actually, last week was technically ReproShabbat. I'll explain in a minute. But a combination of several factors, including the holiday weekend, led to the decision to postpone 1 week. And we are delighted with this powerful and inspiring turnout of people from around our community. So it was obviously the right choice. So thank you for being here again. So usually, ReproShabbat is held when we read from Parashat Mishpatim in the book of Exodus. Parashat Mishpatim, in its long list of rules, lays out the damages to be paid from one man to another. We read in Exodus 21 that if there are two men fighting and a pregnant woman happens to be right there near them and is pushed and then miscarries as a result, damages are paid to her husband based on reckoning. But if she is harmed in another way, damages paid will be reciprocal. What does that mean? Of course. So let's go to the text. It reads in Exodus 21, when men fight and one of them pushes a pregnant woman and a miscarriage results, but no other damage ensues, the one responsible shall be fined according as the woman's husband may exact from him. The payment to be based on reckoning. But if other damage ensues, the penalty shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. Now, this doesn't seem to have a direct correlation to abortion, but tradition understands from this passage that the end of a fetus's life is not considered manslaughter, or murder, which would require the death penalty, only seen as loss of property. So from this text, we understand that according to Torah, causing the termination of a pregnancy is not considered murder. It is a loss of property. We could have a whole conversation of what that means. We're completely disregarding how the woman feels in this moment. But from a technical Jewish legal perspective, this is an essential understanding. Biblical and rabbinic Judaism do not consider an unborn fetus to be a person. They actually consider it to be part of a woman's body. And even though we know it's not scientifically true, Jewish teachings are very clear that life does not begin at conception, it begins at birth. Further in the Mishnah, it's clear that if a pregnant person's life is in danger from the pregnancy or labor, that it is the adult's life that takes precedence. So why is this all important to us? These two Jewish beliefs are violated by the abortion laws in Texas and the abortion laws around the country. There's no doubt that Jewish texts value the life of the mother over that of the unborn fetus. And Jewish texts do not see the ending of a pregnancy as murder. And because we believe here in the United States that we are entitled to religious freedom and a separation of church and state, as modern people, we not only value our autonomy, but we also value that separation from what our religion teaches and what we believe and what the state gets to say about our lives. So all of these attacks in the United States are deeply troubling. It's not my role to tell you what decisions to make in your life. I cannot tell you what to feel or believe or want. I can only provide Jewish texts and information. But I believe, and I imagine everyone here in this room believes too, just like I cannot tell you what to believe or think or do, you cannot tell me what to think or believe or do. And these laws are really set on a religious perspective that is controlling the lives of all Americans, regardless of whether that faith tradition is one that is our personal belief. The more you know, the better equipped you are to speak up and speak out. The more you know, you're better able to navigate the reality of our country's abortion laws today, and of course, support others who might need that help as well. That's why we're here today. We're so grateful for our speakers to be here. It's going to be an amazing program. Thank you all for being here once again.
So this is the fifth year that we've done this program, and every year I learn more about this text. And aren't we lucky that we have a senior rabbi like Mara Nathan? Just give her a hand. So my name is Marcia Krasner, and I'm the Vice President of Advocacy for the San Antonio section of the National Council for Jewish Women. I want to, again, echo Rabbi's remarks. We're so happy to see so many of you here. We're emboldened, excited, and just happy that you came out and decided to spend part of your Saturday with us. I want to give a special call out to 3 women who battled traffic on I-35, our sisters from the Austin section of NCJW, and Molly, one of our speakers, who also battled. Yeah, right. It's pretty horrible. So I just have a few announcements and thank yous, and then we'll get going. As you know, we have 2 speakers, Molly DUANE, Dr. Ellen Braid, and after their presentations, as we normally do, we're going to have what we hope will expect to be a very robust Q&A. So on your tables are cards and pens. Feel free to write more than one question, any questions you want to ask of our speakers, anything that's on your mind. We'll try to get through all of those questions during that session. So before I introduce our first speaker, Molly DUANE, I just want to make a couple of quick announcements and thank yous. First, some of you may know that we've got a long line of tables in the back of this room. Some of them are familiar to you. Planned Parenthood, longtime wonderful partner of ours and of Temple Beth El, is here. But we also this year have the League of Women Voters, and some of you may know that they produce a nonpartisan voters guide, which I have myself found very helpful, and we're now in the early voting period for the March primaries. I was just notified right before this session started that for those of you who have mail-in ballots, you should be putting 2 stamps on it and not 1 because some of them are being returned. So that's one table that, and one group that we haven't had before. We're so happy that you're here. And the other new organization to us is the Frontera Fund. This is a nonprofit based in the Rio Grande Valley. They provide quality reproductive healthcare. They're also what's known as an abortion navigator. So they serve anyone in their service area, the Valley, who wants or needs an abortion with very critical logistical and financial support, how to get out of Texas and get the healthcare that you need. One of the things I want to just mention about the Frontera Fund is that they operate with no state or federal funding, which I think is pretty amazing. Finally, I just want to say a few thank yous before I introduce Molly. Obviously, Temple Beth El, who's provided this amazing, beautiful, safe space for us. I want to give a shout out to Ross, to April, and to Priscilla, who helped us with registration and publicity and with the setup of this room. It's not an easy task, so thank you so much. I want to thank Temple Beth El Sisterhood, Trish Marcus, and Robin Long, who made a contribution to this event. We're very grateful for that. I also want to thank, they're not here, but I want to thank the National Office of NCJW who gave us a grant and really made it possible for us to bring these 2 outstanding speakers into San Antonio today. Molly's from New Jersey and Alan lives in New Mexico, so we really appreciate them being here. And finally, I just want to thank my fellow sisters at this San Antonio section of NCJW, Rhonda, Renee, Ann, Lynn, Ruthie, Shannon, Amy, Mina, for helping pull this thing together. It takes many, many hands to put together a presentation like that. Okay, so now to our first speaker. Molly DUANE is the legal director of Amplify Legal. This is the litigation arm of abortion in America. Some of you may know this organization. It was co-founded in 2024 by the late Cecil Richards and others to bring greater attention to the personal stories of people impacted by abortion bans. Since Roe v. Wade was overturned, hundreds and hundreds of people have come forward to share their traumatic experiences. One after the other, they all say the same thing. They're telling their stories so that no one else has to risk losing their health, their fertility, their freedom, or even their lives. They want accountability. They want change. And in today's environment, one often needs a good lawyer, Molly DUANE, and others, to combat the dangerous abortion bans such as we have here in Texas that get in the way between patients and their medical providers. Some of you, and I guess want to see by a raise of hands, how many saw either here or elsewhere the documentary Zorowski v. Texas? So very powerful documentary. And for those of you who have seen it, you will immediately recognize Molly DUANE in that documentary, as she was the lead lawyer for the plaintiff in this class action lawsuit against the state. Molly is also a public health professional and an expert on a person's legal rights during pregnancy. She has emerged as one of the go-to lawyers for individuals and families harmed by abortion bans. Before starting as the legal director at Amplify Legal, she worked for a decade as a litigator for the Center for Reproductive Rights, as many of you saw in the documentary. Last year, I didn't know this until I looked it up, Molly was named by Time Magazine as one of the 100 Next list. It's pretty impressive. Molly has degrees from Princeton University, the Benjamin Cardozo School of Law at Yeshiva University, and the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. As I said, lives in New Jersey with her 2 children. As an aside, when we spoke with Molly and Alan about their presentations, 2 tidbits that Molly mentioned really stood out for me personally, and I think are key to her success and her impact. The first is that apparently Molly wanted to be a scientist and then kind of abandoned that idea because she didn't think that would improve people's lives enough. So that's what I call commitment. Pretty impressive. Second, despite many fears that people have about the threats to the availability of medical abortions in Texas and elsewhere, Molly said that she feels optimistic. I am really eager to hear why she feels optimistic, as I'm sure you are too. So let's give a hand to Molly, and thank you.
So as you know, I'm a reproductive rights lawyer, and for the last 11 years, I have been litigating cases on behalf of doctors, clinics, and now patients seeking and providing abortion care. For years, all I did was work to keep the Texas clinics open. Now, sometimes all I can do is help one Texan at a time. The work is different, and it's even more important now, I believe. But I want to zoom out for a moment because what I want to talk today about is bravery. And I want to start with a brief story. So at the end of 2021, the US Supreme Court heard oral argument in the case Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health, the lawsuit that ultimately resulted in the overturning of Roe v. Wade. As is common for big Supreme Court cases, while the lawyers were inside litigating the case, there was a rally on the outside of the courthouse in Washington, D.C. Now, typically these rallies involve 2 groups of peaceful protesters, each with their own microphones, posters, banners, speaking and protesting peacefully for either side of the case. I was not inside the courtroom that day. I was outside in the rally. Now, I have been to many of these rallies before, and I want to talk about 2 things that were very different about this rally. First, our side was vastly outnumbered. I'll get to this in a moment, but this is not because there are more of them than there are of us. Rather, this is because seemingly every anti-abortion extremist in the country had come to the rally that day. They are admittedly a vocal minority, but they are a minority, and they showed up. Meanwhile, our side had not. Maybe they didn't believe that Roe would be overturned. Maybe they just didn't prioritize this among the other things in their lives. But they did not show up. Second, this rally was not peaceful. In a way I had never seen at the Supreme Court before, the other side was up in our faces, verbally and sometimes even physically accosting us and pushing us into an ever-diminishing space. And as I walked through the crowd, I heard one thing repeatedly. Protesters from the other side were high-fiving each other and clapping each other on the back and saying, "Hey man, haven't seen you since January 6th. So here's what I want you to know. The same people that tried to overthrow the government earlier that year, they were at that rally too. People who are anti-democratic, anti-immigrant, anti-vaccine, anti-science, they are also anti-abortion. It's the same people. And when we fight anti-abortion extremism, we are also fighting fascism. And I'll just say this, if you look at our country at large, abortion is one of the most popular things that this vocal minority opposes. So maybe, just maybe, prioritizing abortion is a good way to make inroads against all forms of anti-democratic extremism. Because abortion is actually popular. It is more popular now than it has ever been. In poll after poll since Roe was overturned, even people who oppose abortion for themselves, they don't believe that they, and certainly not the government, should be making decisions about other families. And this is true across the country. So I recently filed a lawsuit in Arkansas challenging Arkansas's abortion ban and seeking to strike it down in its entirety under the Arkansas Constitution. And before we filed, we did some Arkansas-specific polling. Just wanted to see what Arkansans actually thought of this law. And guess what? Across the political aisle, the abortion ban in Arkansas is deeply unpopular. In fact, over 100,000 Arkansans signed a petition to put abortion directly on the ballot in 2024. But their state Supreme Court prevented the issue from going to the ballot because of a pretty lame paperwork technicality. Again, anti-abortion, anti-democratic. Abortion is only considered political because we have let this vocal minority tell us that it is so. There are more of us than there are of them. They should be afraid of us, and yet somehow it is the other way around. Even now, abortion rights as a movement remains in a defensive crouch. I, as a lawyer, am often in rooms when out-of-the-box legal theories are discussed, and too often we are afraid to do anything bold. I'm fond of joking, are people worried that Roe might get overturned? I think we're already there, it already happened. Now is the moment. So these days, as Marcia mentioned, we're fighting back against attacks nationwide on medication abortion, as we must. But in my opinion, we're doing very little to proactively call out the harms of the anti-abortion movement. You may know that in recent years, antis have put their focus on mifepristone, the first drug in the medication abortion regimen. They say that it's unsafe. We point to the data that says it's safer than Tylenol, and most of the public doesn't hear or care either side. What we aren't talking about is how the second drug, misoprostol, is used on its own to perform abortions across the world, nor how that drug has become ubiquitous in modern obstetrical medicine. It's the first drug I took when my labor was induced with my daughter. I assure you, misoprostol isn't going anywhere. It is a staple of obstetric medicine. It is dirt cheap, and it is too important to so many aspects of healthcare. So why am I mentioning this? You heard that I'm a science nerd at heart, so just bear with me for a moment. But in my opinion, we could and maybe we should be laughing in the faces of anti-abortion extremists saying, try all you want, but you will never stop people from having abortions. This was always true, but science has progressed exponentially in the 50 years since Roe was decided. Misoprostol is here to stay, and remember, there's more of us than there are of them, and abortion is popular. We could be saying all the time, you will never stop us, and yet we aren't. So what does this all have to do with bravery? Well, I believe that bravery is contagious. So I want to talk about 3 acts of bravery today. And I'll start with 2 that inspired me personally in the fall of Roe and explain how they ultimately led to change completely the way that I practice law. So let's go back to 2021 for a moment, the year that Dobbs was argued. The other thing that I probably don't have to tell the people in this room about that happened in 2021 is that the US Supreme Court let SB 8, Texas's 6-week abortion ban, go into effect fully 9 months before Roe was overturned. We as the lawyers had done what we always did. We filed a lawsuit to stop the ban, and if the justices of the US Supreme Court were to maintain any semblance of fidelity to the rule of law, they would not let that ban go into effect, even this court. Or at least that's what we told ourselves. And then they did. Now, Dr. Alan Braid, who's sitting right there, who you'll hear from in a moment, he was the first one to say it. I remember exactly where I was standing when he said to me on the phone, "Someone has to violate the ban. I'll do it." That was active bravery number 1. The second came in an email that I received out of the blue a few days later. It started, "I'm pregnant in Texas. I have standing to challenge the law. I want to help." That was active bravery number 2. Looking at these 2 people, I had to ask myself, if they were brave, why couldn't I be? So I made the decision to be brave too, and together we jumped. Ultimately, as I'm sure you all know, we lost. We did not get SB 8 struck down. But I, for one, was never the same. Because here's the other thing that Dr. Braid taught me. There is always a way. Women will always find a way to have abortions. Advocates and providers will always find a way to provide it. It is never a question of if abortion will continue. It is always a question of how. And the brave among us are the ones who will make it possible. When Texas's abortion ban went into effect, Dr. Braid and much of his staff picked up their families and their lives, and they moved to New Mexico. They just picked everything up and left. Kids in high school, kids in elementary school, everyone went. And now they see the same patients that they used to see here in San Antonio, hundreds of miles away in New Mexico. As for me, I can't keep the clinics open anymore. I can't help hundreds or thousands of people at a time, but I can help one person at a time. So I want to tell you a second story. On June 24th, 2022, I woke up in the early hours of the morning because my 2-year-old daughter was screaming. My husband, Mike, and I rushed into the room, and before turning on the lights, I reached my hand into the crib to pull her out. And in the dark, I missed, and my hand disappeared into a pool of vomit. Lights on, sheets changed, temperature checked, Tylenol administered. It occurred to me. I said, "Mike, we have to give her a COVID test." And immediately the blue line lit up like a neon sign. She was supposed to get her first COVID shot the next day. We'd missed it by 15 hours. So we decided to isolate our COVID-positive daughter from my 3-month-old son in the hopes that our baby boy, who was still so young, wouldn't get exposed. Mike would stay in the kitchen with her. I would stay upstairs nursing the baby. It was possible and pretty likely that we were all exposed, but, knee, hand, and vomit, all that. But we felt we had to try to protect him as best we could. So that's where I was at 10 a.m. when Roe v. Wade was overturned by the US Supreme Court. I was essentially alone, with no one to talk to, no one to hug, no one who understood what was happening, and my only companion was my infant son, and I was afraid to get too close to him, even with a mask on. I looked into those little blue eyes and I wondered what sort of world we were going to leave for these kids. Meanwhile, calls and text messages started pouring into my phone, and for most, I didn't have the words. But then I saw an incoming call from one of my colleagues in Texas. I answered, and she told me that she was calling me because a friend of hers was pregnant with her second child and had just had her 20-week anatomy scan that day. And at the appointment, the patient learned that she had a previously undiagnosed cervical insufficiency, and she was going to go into labor any moment, long before her pregnancy would be viable. So on the day that Roe fell, she needed an abortion, she needed it in Texas, and she needed it now. Now on the same day, our good friend Ken Paxton was busy tweeting that all abortions in the state were now immediately illegal, enforced by both civil and now criminal penalties. The patient was told that no one in Austin would treat her. All the clinics in surrounding states were already being inundated by calls, and appointments were booked out for weeks. It was chaos. But this patient now had my phone number. And as we talked, I realized that while she understood that she was inevitably going to lose this child, she did not quite grasp that staying in Texas might lead to a double death sentence. So I had two options. The easy thing would have been to give her the phone number of a clinic in New Mexico and call it a day. It's what most lawyers would have done. Instead, I told her that I would personally make her an appointment in New Mexico, and in the meantime, she should get in her car and start driving. Because I knew if she developed an infection or started hemorrhaging, every Texas hospital would turn her away. If she made it to an emergency room in New Mexico, at least she would get the healthcare she needed because it was still legal. Maybe I was overstepping with someone I didn't know, but my gut told me it was the right thing to do. And so I did what Dr. Braid taught me, and I decided to be brave. I called in a favor with a clinic administrator in Albuquerque. This was before Dr. Braid and his staff had moved, and the best she could do was offer an appointment on Tuesday morning. It was Friday. But at my urging late that night, the patient started driving. She didn't make it to her appointment on Tuesday, but she did make it to an emergency room in New Mexico, and she has since given birth to her second child. But she doesn't live in Texas anymore because she doesn't feel safe here. As it turns out, as many of you know who have seen the documentary, my experience on the day Roe fell was not an anomaly. It was rather a harbinger for the direction my career would take. And I have spent the last 4 years working almost exclusively with families who have been harmed by abortion bans and other forms of anti-abortion extremism. I've probably talked to over 200 people, and for some, I have directed them to abortion clinics or hospitals out of state. Some I have connected to abortion funds, and for others, I've filed lawsuits. I have found these lawsuits to be transformational. For someone who has been harmed, it helps them take back control over an experience that robbed them of their autonomy. And for the public, it helps them understand at a visceral and human level what an abortion ban looks like in practice. My clients are reaching people apathetic to the problem of abortion in ways that none of my other work ever has. I describe these patient-led lawsuits as a higher platform from which someone's voice can be heard. So late last year, I woke up one morning and decided that these were the only lawsuits I wanted to file, at least in this moment. And so I left my job at a large and comfortable nonprofit to essentially strike out on my own with a small team of people I sometimes call like-minded lunatics. And that was the third act of bravery, my own. Yesterday, in the middle of an all-day workshop at the University of Texas that I was attending on these exact issues, I was also helping a patient with an ectopic pregnancy find care who had been turned away from 3 different hospitals in 2 different ban states. Right now, she's driving to Kansas. The work has been hard, but I've never been happier. Again, I can't keep the clinics open anymore, but I can help one person at a time, and today I am. I can ask a court to give Kate Cox an exception to the abortion ban. I can help 5 people harmed by Arkansas's abortion ban sue their state. I can represent someone who's lost their fertility because a Catholic hospital turned them away. I can help these women stand up and be brave themselves. And I've seen it again and again, how when these people, these women, share their stories, their personal experiences of loss and fighting back publicly against those who have harmed them, their bravery inspires others to join the cause. They inspire others to do more. They inspire people to show up. So that's what I'm gonna do, show up for them. I don't know what the next year is gonna bring for our movement, let alone the next 5 or 10. And that's the same for my career. I don't know where I'm going anymore. But I believe that what I'm doing right now, that this is what fighting back looks like. Change has to come, but it will only come when we have the bravery to demand it. So if I can ask you one thing today, it's this. Be brave, whatever that looks like for you. Be brave and then pass it on. Thank you.
My name is Renee Sable, and I am honored to introduce our next speaker. For over 50 years, Dr. Alan Braid has been a prominent figure in advocating for reproductive rights. He earned his medical degree as part of the first graduating class at the UT Health Science Center at San Antonio, and beginning in the 1970s, he had a thriving OB/GYN practice, providing a wide range of reproductive health care, including abortion services. Over the years, Dr. Braid has been involved in several high-profile lawsuits challenging state abortion bans. When SB 8 went into effect in 2021, as Molly mentioned, he intentionally violated this law that made it illegal to perform an abortion in Texas past the 6-week mark. In an opinion piece for the Washington Post, Dr. Braid explained his decision as a matter of duty of care. Although the ensuing lawsuit against him was eventually dropped, additional restrictive laws prompted Dr. Braid to close his clinics in San Antonio and Oklahoma and to relocate his practice to Albuquerque, New Mexico. To meet increasing demands in a wider geographical area, he also opened a clinic in Carbondale, Illinois. The new clinics still bear the name Alamo Women's Reproductive Services, highlighting his half-century commitment to serving women in need of reproductive health care. On a personal level, Dr. Braid's son, Adam, and my daughter, Shelley, have been good friends since elementary school, and I thank Adam for connecting us with his dad. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Alan Braid.
My family, my children are here, grandchildren are here, which makes me all the more nervous. My daughter, Andrea, who has been very active and vocal, both on TV, radio. She has contributed to articles in the New York Times. She could not be here today because of a family emergency, and you will all miss her being here. But my daughter, Carrie, who also works for the clinic, she's an integral part of getting patients to our facility from Texas, Louisiana, everywhere, where patients can't access clinics. My children, my wife, my education somehow everyone has got me to this point. And most of us don't think about how we've arrived at our station in life or our place or our purpose. And I never really gave it a lot of thought until I was asked to speak here today. But I would like to acknowledge probably the most influential person responsible for where I am today. And that woman is Marilyn Eldridge. Marilyn passed away in October of 2019. Marilyn graduated from the University of Texas Law School in the 60s. She was one of 4 women in that class. She graduated magna cum laude. And when she graduated, the only job she could get in a law firm was as a secretary, unlike her male counterparts who were offered attorney positions. I don't know if that's the only thing that fueled Marilyn. Marilyn was very fueled, I would say, on a lot of issues. And actually, she had a nickname around San Antonio. She was the feminist in a Chanel suit. I don't think I ever remember seeing her not in that Chanel, one of many Chanel suits. So Marilyn and her husband, back in the 70s after Roe, her husband's name was Myron Chrisman, and she and Chris started the first abortion clinic in San Antonio, Reproductive Services. I'll go into that a little later. I don't want to talk about it twice, but I'll tell you a little bit more about Marilyn. She was the president of Battle of Flowers here in San Antonio. She was involved in the Charity Ball, the Junior League. She was active in the Battered Women and Children's Shelter and many other causes in San Antonio. Molly knew her well and was an amazing, amazing woman. So I want to go back in time and tell you where I started, where I think I started. So July 1st, 1972, began my OBGYN internship at Bexar County Hospital, now known as University Hospital. On June 30th, the night before, I was wondering, how am I going to get to sleep? Tomorrow, I'm going to be a real doctor. So I thought, instead of counting sheep or playing my favorite golf hole in my head, I'm going to try to think of all the facts that I've learned over the past 4 years that will help me on day one. Well, it was a long, sleepless night. I could not come up with one single useful fact. But anyway, I showed up at rounds at 6 a.m. on the GYN floor. After rounds, I was assigned to a first-year resident who I knew well, Dr. Marco Lopez. Some of you in this room may know Marco. I know John knew Marco. So Marco and I were assigned to the OR. Our assignment in the OR was to take care of the outpatient surgery schedule. The outpatient surgery schedule included patients who were there for first trimester surgical abortions. And in the traditional see one, do one, teach one, higher education form of learning, Marco did the first case. He guided me through the second case, and then he announced he was off to make rounds and seek consultations in the rest of the hospital, but I could page him if I needed him. Somehow I got through that day without any big catastrophes, and I survived my internship year. And thinking back on it, doing those abortions was my first contact with abortion care. It wasn't an epiphany. It didn't seem like, oh, this is a strange thing, doing abortions. It seemed like part of my normal training as an OB-GYN. And so I think without really intellectualizing, I realized that abortion care is health care. So if you remember, July 1st, 1972, when I started my internship, Roe was not adjudicated. The Roe decision had not come down yet. But yet, in Texas, where generally abortion was illegal, at the medical school, we were doing abortions. And we did them because there were medical exceptions that allowed us to do abortions. One of those medical exceptions were for psychiatric indications. And Molly probably can back me up on this. Today, where there are banned states and they have exceptions, psychological, psychiatric indications are not considered ever. So back then, if a patient didn't have heart disease, renal disease, an abnormality, or whatever, those patients who were seeking abortion had to meet with someone in the psychiatry department and admit to them and sign paperwork saying that if they were forced to continue that pregnancy, they would do harm to themselves. So I can't even imagine the desperation in women in those days to have to admit that they would end their life if they had to continue a pregnancy, whether they would have or not. To have to admit that bothers me immensely to this day. So the OB-GYN department that was started here at our new medical school back then was all the professors that started that department were from Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. those doctors, those professors, those teachers of mine strongly believed that abortion was health care. During the pre-Roe months of my internship, and actually even into 1973, when Roe was around for a year or more, we still saw patients in the ER who were injured by so-called back alley abortions. I was on duty in labor and delivery as a first-year resident, and one of our duties as a first-year resident was to be in 3 places at one time. In labor and delivery, we covered ER, we covered postpartum, we covered all sorts of things. And I was called to the ER to see a young patient who was critically ill. She was 16 years old. She had a catheter in her uterus, and her vagina was packed with rags to hold that catheter in place. She was septic and soon died of organ failure. And I think that was my epiphany. I resolved that I would do anything I could do as a physician for as long as I could to not ever let that happen again. I completed my residency in 1976 and had a 2-year obligation to spend in the military. So I served as a OB-GYN, as a rank of major. I didn't know much about being a major. In the United States Air Force, and I was stationed at Dover Air Force Base in Dover, Delaware. When I first got to the base, I reported to the hospital commander, a Fulberg colonel. He was also an OB-GYN, and he sat myself and my colleague down and said, "Okay, you guys are never to refer a patient for an abortion. You're not to talk about abortion. And you are not even allowed to say the word." So I wasn't sure whether this was an Air Force regulation, his bias, or his regulation, or the bases, but I really didn't care because I knew that regulation didn't apply to me. And so it seemed like it never ended. We, over the years, even though Roe was well established, we all thought, there were trap laws, targeted regulation against abortion providers. TRAP, great word. And so Molly and her colleagues and others were instrumental in getting us through these TRAP laws, not always reversing them, but helping us get around them. And we certainly couldn't have done that without great lawyers and great people like Molly. Let's see, so now we're in 1978. I'm out of the Air Force, back in San Antonio to practice OBGYN. Back in 1978, physicians didn't join large medical groups. We just opened a practice with maybe one other buddy or by ourselves, which was in my case. And after, I think about a year or two, one of my ex-professors who had gone into private practice approached me and said, "Hey, how would you like to work for this abortion clinic on Thursday afternoon? Take my place." So this clinic had a different doctor on Monday, different one on Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. And my day was Thursday. I said, "Sure, I'd like to do that." And that's when I met the Chrismans, and I first worked at Reproductive Services of San Antonio. Interestingly, when the Chrismans opened that clinic, they firmly believed that it would be temporary, that they wouldn't be needed. Now that Roe was passed, everybody was happy. OB-GYNs in private practice would offer abortions in their practices, and people wouldn't have to go to strange clinics and see strange doctors and all of that. Well, we all know how that worked out. And the Chrismans wound up opening clinics in Austin, El Paso, McAllen, and Tulsa, Oklahoma. They were actually a nonprofit, and they incorporated something called adoption affiliates. And so here was a nonprofit that under their same roof ran abortion clinics and adoption clinics. Marilyn was one of her passions and one of her proud moments. Actually, there was an article written in Time magazine about her and that endeavor. So that was an unusual and wonderful thing that Nova Health Clinics did at Maryland's guidance. So in 2008, I had occasion to be in Marilyn's office, and we were having a conversation, and she said, "Alan, why don't you just buy the San Antonio clinic and run it the way you want? You know, you're always calling me, can we do this, can we do that? Just, you take it over. How am I gonna do that? I mean, I don't even really run my own office. I don't even know who files insurance. You know, I just go to the OR, go to labor and delivery, which was most doctors. I mean, what we like to do is see patients, not write notes and go to meetings and all that. Anyway, so I agreed, and we ran that clinic, and then eventually bought the clinic in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And Marilyn retired, Nova was done. And I owned those two clinics. And fortunately, we had the clinic in Oklahoma, because when SB 8 came along, SB 8 was the heart bill law that that Molly talked about, most abortions around the country, around the world, are done under 12 weeks. There's a relatively small amount of abortions done later than that. And the majority of women don't realize their pregnancy exists before 6 weeks. And that's usually when a heartbeat is found. So all of a sudden, we were limited. We had a 10,000 square foot surgery center that we built because of another law called HB 2 that was eventually struck down by the Supreme Court in Hellerstedt versus Whole Women's Health. And actually, the injunction that the Supreme Court issued against HB 2 was on the very day we opened our 10,000 square foot surgery center. The very day. But now we had a beautiful, nice facility, and it worked out. It worked out fine. But SB 8 closed a lot of clinics in Texas, as did HB 2 as well. So prior to September 1st, 2021, we saw about 40 to 50 patients per week in Tulsa. After the SB 8 went into effect, we saw 150 to 200 patients a week in Tulsa. 80% of them from Texas. And women had to travel. So this was before Dobbs, and we kind of had an idea. We may have been the only clinic in the country that understood how far women would travel for these services. And so after SB 8, some of the attorneys from the Center for Reproductive Rights and Molly were hinting, maybe even more than hinting, that Dobbs was going to fall. I thought they were crazy. Dobbs isn't. Roe was going to fall. I thought that just cannot be. Those Supreme Court guys, when they testified, they said so, didn't they? How could that be? And I recall the case in Ireland of a woman from India who worked in Ireland, ruptured her membranes at 21, 22 weeks, became septic, and Irish law prevented the emptying of her uterus, and she died. And I thought, gosh, if that woman was in San Antonio and my patient, or anybody's patient in San Antonio, we would have emptied her uterus, given her some antibiotics, she'd have gone home in a couple of days, and she'd come for her new OB visit on her next pregnancy 6 months later. But she died. And if Roe, and I think it's been bared out, that if we overturn Roe, the same thing was going to happen here. The definition of insanity, repeating history and hoping it changes. So my concern, of course, was for patients who needed an abortion for various reasons, but I really felt like the women who had wanted pregnancies were going to suffer even more because their suffering couldn't be reversed. You know, if you're 8 weeks pregnant and living in Texas, there was a way you could be treated. But if you were 20 weeks, ruptured your membranes, wanted to continue your pregnancy, you were in a dangerous place. And anyways, so I think I've gotten all of it. So when Dobbs passed in 2022, within 2 months of the passage of Dobbs and closing of our clinics, we saw our first patient in Albuquerque, New Mexico, thanks to Christina, our nursing director, administrator, bottle washer, friend, and great provider and activist. So, and it was mentioned she moved her family to New Mexico, and I think are happy there. Her son is graduating from high school there. And so we opened our clinic in New Mexico, and my daughter Andrea said, "Hey Dad, you know, I was looking at a map, and Carbondale, Illinois is an island in a sea of red, and we ought to open a clinic there." Oh my gosh, I've got a clinic. You know. But Andrea was persistent, and we opened a clinic there a few months later. And Andrea sees patients from Tennessee. The majority of their patients are from Tennessee, Arkansas, Missouri, Florida, Georgia, all over. And they've been a great source for patients seeking these services. And Andrea has moved her family to Carbondale. There's a Carbondale resident right there, I see, my granddaughter. So really, I've only thought a bit about how I got here, and I think this program, this ReproShabbat, has shaken the tree a bit. And I thought, what if I didn't do my residency here? Suppose I did it somewhere else where abortion wasn't provided and I wasn't exposed to abortion. What if, no offense to Notre Dame, but suppose my professors were from Notre Dame and not Johns Hopkins? You know, there wouldn't be a program like they had. So a lot of stars had to align. You know, I also thought, well, suppose I finished my residency and went back to my native New Jersey, where abortion has been part of healthcare for forever. Would I have been an activist? Would I have even been a provider? So I don't think there's been one thing, and I don't think that's the way it is for anybody. There are so many forces that get us to where we wind up. So I would like to, somebody mentioned the Frontera Fund that are here. So not only the Frontera Fund that does great work for patients, they help pay fees for abortions, travel expense, food, lodging. There are many of these organizations that help our patients get to our services, like the National Abortion Federation, the Chicago Abortion Fund, Lilith. There are many, and they all play a special role to help our patients. It's not only providers, it's these wonderful organizations that help patients. The most important part of this whole thing. So I'd like to end by quoting someone quoting somebody. So I mentioned Marilyn Eldridge. Like most, well, no, I shouldn't say that. Like a lot of strong, intelligent people, like to control how they are remembered. So, of course, Marilyn wrote her own obituary. And in that obituary, she quoted Ralph Waldo Emerson. So I'm going to read this poem. I'm not a Ralph Waldo Emerson fan, but I am now. So she wrote, or he wrote, to laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate the beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition, to know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. That is to have success. So, thank you.
If people have questions that they've written down, Lynn over there and Amy are going to collect those. I have one already. Actually, well, I do want to invite up Molly and Alan and Christine to answer these questions, because I'm not going to be able to do that. I also, while everybody's getting up here, I want to mention an article that is on some of your tables and is definitely on the NCJW table. This is an article that appeared in the New York Times on December 7th with the title, "A Small Illinois City at the Center of a Seismic Shift in Abortion Access." And it quotes Dr. Alan Braid. It quotes his daughter Andrea. So if you haven't seen that article, there are copies in the back. So I think the way we'll do this, I'll read the question, and you can all battle over who answers it, okay? So the first question is, can one of you touch on crisis pregnancy centers or fall centers? And this is actually a topic that we covered, I think, 2 years ago in ReproShabbat. So anyone go at it.
My nemesis. I have a very long list of lawsuits I want to bring, and this is one of them. So if you know someone who has been harmed by a crisis pregnancy center, please let me know. So for folks who are not aware, I mean, I'll just summarize briefly, but these are generally anti-abortion, not clinics. They are sort of faith-based organizations that often masquerade as clinics, and before Roe was overturned, they would open across the street from, the only abortion clinic in Mississippi, for example, and sort of would often confuse people on purpose, try to get them in the door, and then convince them not to have an abortion. Nowadays, more people know about these centers, but they are equally, if not more, insidious because anti-abortion forces are pointing to them as the solution to the maternal health crisis that they've created in Idaho, for example. They are not that. They are a good place to get free diapers if you want to sit through a class about Jesus first, but they're not clinics, and so I don't know. What do you want me to say about them? They suck. I don't.
So we have seen patients that get fooled into, they used to park a van where they had an ultrasound machine in the van, and they would stand in front of our clinic, stop patients and say, hey, would you like to have a free ultrasound? And, because if you're going in there, you're going to have to pay for one. And some patients, I mean, these patients have been under tremendous stress. They're looking for help as soon as they can find it. And they would go and get this ultrasound and then come to our clinic eventually and say, oh, they said I was 10 weeks or 12 weeks, and they were what, 6 or 8 weeks, and they would lie to them and really give them false information. The horrible thing is that, and I don't quite understand how Google works, but a lot of patients find us by Googling abortion. And under abortion clinics, Google allows these fake clinics to be present. And a lot of our patients will call them and waste a lot of time, energy, and get false information. And there's not much we can do about it. I hope Molly can do something about it. So.
Okay. This is a question that I actually also have. The questioner is asking, are current OBGYNs in residency being taught how to perform abortions? Now, the person didn't say where, but I think you can just guess. And so if one of you could just talk about that issue.
Well, not here. They don't have a program at the Health Science Center here. In order to be OB-GYN residencies, surgery residencies, all residencies are rated to some extent. And one of the criterias for you to be a top-rated OBGYN training program, you have to include abortion training. So when we had our clinic here, although they didn't offer abortion training at the medical school or at University Hospital, any resident who wanted to spend time learning abortion could come to Alamo Women's Reproductive Services Surgery Center, and we would teach them abortion care. Over the years, I think we've only had 2 or 3 residents, and interestingly, now in Albuquerque, we help train the fellows in the complicated family practice fellowships, how to do advanced cases.
We have a question about the Albuquerque clinic, and I guess you have 2 clinics there now, right? Is that correct? Could you talk, Christina, a little bit about how patients that are not from New Mexico, that don't live in New Mexico, get there? A little bit about the percentage of non-New Mexico residents that you serve, and just a little bit about the demographics, and just give us all a feeling for how Alan moved his whole operation from Texas to New Mexico. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So of course, majority, I'm like, oh. Majority, yes, of all our patients do travel from Texas. And when we had made the decision to move to Albuquerque, a lot of it was because of kind of all the care that Dr. Braid has provided in San Antonio. And so that's why we stuck with our name for both Carbondale and Albuquerque, to really let patients know that we are still here and we are, open New Mexico and Carbondale. But yes, 90% of our patients that we see at our Alamo clinic are all from Texas. Different states as well, because we do later gestations. But the majority do have to travel. They have to drive, they have to take a bus, they have to fly, multiple flights. We have to deal with weather delays, flight delays, and be able to accommodate all the patients that we can. And I must say that great thanks to all the organizations that help the patients, because cost, of course, is huge, not only for the procedure and the services that they really need, but just getting there and having to come alone because they have to leave their family home to be able to make it to us. And it's a long journey for all the patients. It's definitely given a different perspective of having seen patients in San Antonio for so long, seeing what they have to go through now. It's just heartbreaking, but glad that we're here and still able to help everyone as much as we can.
Thank you so much. This is maybe a quick question, I don't know, for Molly, maybe not. Are there any legal ramifications to an individual for leaving the state, I assume Texas or perhaps any other state that has the same abortion ban, for leaving the state to get an abortion in another state? I mean, they've been talking about watching people's driver's licenses, license plates, etc. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I don't think I've ever given a short answer in my life, but I'll try. So this is very important, and I say this every time I get asked it. It is not illegal to travel for an abortion. It is not illegal to help someone travel for an abortion, even under SB 8. SB 8 only made it illegal because it was just that stopgap to get us to Dobbs for the people who were in charge of it. It was just to prevent people from doing abortions in Texas. So I want people to remember that. That does not mean that the fear is not real and that the confusion that has been created was not intentional, because it was. And I talked to a patient a few weeks ago who was driving from Texas to Kansas, and got stopped by a police officer outside of Tulsa who said, "You're not going to get an abortion in Kansas, are you?" So that is the type of emboldening that is happening. There's no reason for that police officer to ask that, but I'll just take this opportunity to say, never consent to a search, ever. And when someone asks you that question, don't answer it. Okay, free legal advice.
Love it. We've got a couple of questions that are really similar, and it's actually embedded in NCJW San Antonio and how we do our presentations, which we often have a call to action. You know, we don't ever want people to leave despondent. What can we do? And so a couple of people have said the same question, which is, what can we do? Since Molly mentioned that we are in the majority, since Alan has, mentioned that people will travel wherever they need to have an abortion, what can this audience do to ensure that women and other people that are pregnant, I'm supposed to say that now, get the medical care that they need?
So I do have a stock answer to this because I get asked it a lot. First, I believe culture shift is an important piece of what we're looking at here. We are not going to win until there is a different attitude about pregnancy in this country. And part of it is about abortion bans, but part of it is much deeper than that. So what I always tell people, and this doesn't cost any money, you don't have to donate, talk about your pregnancies. Talk about what your journey to becoming a parent or not becoming a parent was like. You have no idea how many people come up to me after I've spoken at something and say, I had an illegal abortion in 1962 and I've never told anyone in my life. Don't be that person who never tells people, who never talks about it. This is a personal thing and you can disagree with me, but I think it is deeply harmful that people don't tell people in their lives that they're pregnant until after the first trimester. Because then you would have to tell someone that the pregnancy ended and that would be bad. Like, no, most people have miscarriages, and so that's one thing I encourage. A practical thing is to give to an abortion fund. Set up a monthly donation to the Frontera Fund, or pick your favorite fund. And if you have a few dollars left over, donate to my organization, Abortion in America. Okay, thank you.
Yes to all of that. Christina, so somebody asks, if a patient comes from Texas with insurance, health insurance, does it cover the procedure in Albuquerque?
Even if you have an insurance that would carry, or if you have an insurance that would cover services for fetal anomalies or anything, you still can't get treatment in Texas. And so the insurance would not carry over to New Mexico. So unfortunately, we can't help the Texas residents that have insurance to be able to pay for the procedures.
You want to hear something wild? Someone who has a fatal fetal condition and wants to end the pregnancy and not continue it to term, if they travel to another state and they have insurance from their home state, and they want to be induced, all they want is labor to be induced so that they can say goodbye to the child and grieve. That is not covered by insurance because that's an elective abortion, so they will get a bill for $20,000 from the hospital.
So, someone asks, great question, if there are more of us, which you talked about, Molly, and I think you all have alluded to, who support legal abortion care, then why do we continue to elect governors and state legislators who do not? Are abortion rights not a priority for many voters? And before you answer this, I just want to remind you all that we have a bevy of tables back there, including the Frontera Fund, including League of Women Voters, a lot of information, a lot of staff, Planned Parenthood is there, so don't neglect to visit the tables when the Q&A is over.
Right, so when abortion is on the ballot on its own, it wins. And when it doesn't win, it's because the system was rigged. So in Florida, for example, the abortion ballot initiative didn't pass because they got 57% of the vote. And right before this happened, Florida changed the standard to be 60%. So the problem is that people don't prioritize abortion among the issues that they vote on. But they should, and that is something that we're working on. And one of the reasons that I care so much about representing individual patients in lawsuits is that we actually have data that shows that hearing these stories not only changes how voters feel about abortion, but it changes how they prioritize abortion in the way that they vote. And the reason that I talk about the links between fascism and anti-abortionism is because I want people to understand that these things are connected. So it's something we're working on, but it's going to take a while.
Thank you. Alan, someone in our audience, and I'm actually interested as well, want to know about the lawsuit that you filed after SB 8 and why it was dropped.
So you have to correct me if I'm wrong. So you're talking about the 3 suits that were filed against me, I assume. So the way this law worked is that defendants cannot win. Because even if you win the judgment, this law says that you still have to pay the other side's legal fees, as well as your own. Most civil suits, if you win the suit, the other side pays legal fees. Anyway, the 3 people that sued, there were 2 disbarred attorneys, and the other guy was a stalker or something. He lost his teaching position somewhere because he stalked one of his students. So these are the people that sued us. And unfortunately, well, fortunately, it brought a lot of press. We got a lot of notoriety out of that Washington Post article, but it didn't change the law. We couldn't get it overturned. We couldn't get it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, Molly can give you the reason why. I don't get it. But so it did a lot of things, but really didn't do what we intended. So I was always disappointed about that.
Yeah, so the boring legal answer is that the only people that sued Dr. Braid were these pro se litigants who did not, have the best legal strategies. But the cases got dismissed against Dr. Braid, but no one ever appealed, right? So we never got a ruling. The cases have gone away, but we never got a ruling that SB 8 was unconstitutional. And in the meantime, Dobbs came down and overturned Roe, and so there was sort of no way to get back to the Supreme Court. So yeah, they set it up that way on purpose.
This question is probably from a medical provider, or doctor. Says that in the mid-90s, this person gave anesthesia in an abortion clinic in Akron, Ohio. And then in the early 2000s, it closed as I guess the state insisted the clinics have hospital standards, including room size. Has that happened in Texas? In Texas.
So that was HB2. HB2 said that every abortion, medical, surgical, at 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 20, didn't matter, had to be done in a licensed ambulatory surgery center. Licensing of an ambulatory surgery center is very complicated. We had to redo doors that weren't a half an inch too narrow, floors that the seam wasn't exactly right. I mean, it was a mess. And again, as I said, once we were approved by the state, ready to open the door, the Supreme Court handed down an injunction against HB2. But now we had a brand new surgery center. So yes, it closed, it's not like you say, oh, you need a 48-hour waiting period. Well, you don't have to do anything except wait 48 hours. But if they say you can't perform an abortion unless it's in a surgery center, you can't magically wave a wand. It took us 1.5 years to build that surgery center. So, as a result, a lot of clinics went out of business. And surgery center was one of the things that Greg Abbott did. And I was going to say, all of these trap laws, every law that Texas passed against abortion, the other side said, this is going to make abortion safer. That was their reasoning. Well, there has never been a law passed by the state of Texas that has made women's health safer, ever. I challenge anybody to point to one.
So many great questions. This probably is directed to your talk, a little bit about the abortion pill ban and the threat. So the question posed is, how does that affect women, pregnant people, and are there any other new threats that we need to be worried about?
Yeah, so reasonable people could disagree, but I actually think it's good that the anti-abortion folks are focused on mifepristone, because as I mentioned, it's not going to stop medication abortions. What it will do is make medication abortion more difficult, more painful, and take longer. So it's more about punishing pregnant people than it is about anything else. But that's what they're focused on. I mean, everything else that they're doing is kind of lame, if you ask me. Like, they passed a law in Texas last year called HB7 that says that anyone who manufactures abortion pills that somehow make it into the state of Texas can be sued for $50,000 or something. It's similar to SB 8. And I'm like, okay, good luck with that, right? The drug manufacturer of mifepristone, that's all they make. They're not gonna stop making mifepristone because Texas is saber rattling. And sure enough, they didn't. And there's only one lawsuit at the moment that has any legal claims related to that, and it's about a provider in California that they're trying to extradite, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, good. Spend your time focused on that. We'll focus on other things. So in general, I just think we give them too much credit. We let the fear that they are causing intentionally overwhelm us and make us forget that they're the ones on the defensive now. They're the ones who are relying on the law.
This is a related question that just came up, and actually I've read a little bit about this, and I guess it's a continuation of your answer to the last. Do you see any threats against contraception? I mean, I've read about some, what I think would be extreme people thinking that contraception is a form of terminating a pregnancy. So one of you take that one on.
Yeah, again, it's not about abortion, it's about control. And the people that are anti-abortion, this vocal minority fully believes that pregnancy should happen according to God's plan and that we should have no control over it. So yes, they are coming after contraception as they have been for a long time. And now it involves IVF because IVF also goes against that belief that it's God's plan for when pregnancy occurs. Listen, I don't have an opinion about erectile dysfunction.
Kind of on a follow-up to medication, abortion, and contraception, Some of you might know that there's the morning after pill, Plan B emergency contraception. We have it on our table in the back. Does anybody want to comment on the availability of that, the effectiveness of it, and so on?
So yeah, the morning after pill, as it's called, is hormonal. It prevents implantation of a fertilized egg, and it works probably 80% of the time if it's taken in a timely manner. So, you know, it should be available like birth control pills should have been available over the counter, and but it's not over the counter, but it is available.
Fact check, Plan B is available over the counter? Yeah. It's a form of contraception. So these things are all a spectrum. The thing I want people to understand is Plan B is not the same as medication abortion. The drugs are actually different.
Right, and just a reminder, we have free Plan B back there for anyone and anyone who knows somebody who might want that. So this person says there are several doctors here. I am one. The large majority of physicians oppose abortion restrictions, present company. Why are physicians derelict? This is you've got to speculate about this, I guess, but why are physicians derelict in not organizing, using their enormous leverage to change the Dobbs opinion? Great question.
Well, that's a good question. I don't think I have an answer. I mean, as I said, when the Chrismans opened their clinic after Roe, they expected that since it was legal and in their minds part of women's health, that all physicians would provide abortion. And of course, that didn't happen. And I think the same thing with SB 8. I think if more physicians would have ignored that law and proceeded as if it hadn't existed, it would have had no effect. But, you know, doctors are risk adverse, and I really wish we all stood together on the same side of this, but we don't.
Yeah, I want to add something here. I mean, I try not to villainize any one person on our side or group of people on our side. Like, are there physicians who could be doing more? Yes, no. Definitely. But what's really interesting is that for so long, because of what you describe, abortion was not something that most physicians had to deal with because they could always just send them to your clinic. Now the clinics are gone, and it's kind of interesting because now every doctor in Texas has to be an abortion provider or has to deal with it when there's a medical emergency. And I think what we're seeing, and it might take a while, but it is people realizing that this is part of patient care. And I think if I had to give physicians a bit of advice, it would be stop thinking so much about fidelity to your specialty and think more about fidelity to the patients. Because saying I'm an anesthesiologist, this isn't my problem, it's just not true. I had a client who was extremely ill in Texas. Everyone agreed that she needed an abortion, and it took them 21 days to find an anesthesiologist who would do it.
So I think we have about 5 more minutes. I'm going to go rogue. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to ask a question? Come on up. Oh, you don't want to? Okay.
Well, you mentioned that there were I don't remember who, but one of you mentioned that there were still hospitals that were turning away patients who had like ectopic pregnancy, which of course treatment is legal, for ectopic pregnancy. So what can we do in those cases where people are being turned away? Is that just like you have to sue the hospital? If they're turning away patients for treatment that is legal? Like, is there...
Yeah, you don't want to get me started about ectopic pregnancy, but let me just highlight something here. People do not walk into the emergency room with a sign on their forehead that says, I have an ectopic pregnancy, right? It is about diagnosing the ectopic pregnancy, and the hesitation is, well, what if I'm wrong and this isn't ectopic, and then I've terminated a potentially viable pregnancy. And so what's happening is patients, including the one I'm working with today, are being said, well, I don't know, why don't you come back in another 48 hours and we'll check your HCG again. There's like some obsession with HCG values as though they're like biblical. Can you explain this to me? No. So it's just not that simple. That's not how medicine works, and this is what happens when you say this type of pregnancy termination is legal and this one is not. It isn't that simple.
I think there's another question here.
Molly, could you repeat the name of your organization? Didn't hear it very well. Thank you.
That's a good one, an easy one. Softball.
Yeah, so the organization I work for now is called Abortion in America. It's a little difficult to Google, I understand, I apologize for that. But if you Google Abortion in America, Cecile Richards, you'll probably find it. And there's a donation button. But donate to the abortion fund first.
Okay, you all got that, right? Rabbi Stahl has a question.
I just want to remind everybody that there's nothing in the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament that forbids abortion. This is a made-up issue. Only the Roman Catholic Church has a religious basis for condemning abortion. So when groups use scripture to defend their position, it's false.
Love that answer. Okay, what time is it? Where are we on time? Okay, any other questions? I mean, you can also use the time again, go back to the room. Oh, one more question. This question says, are you saying no Texas physicians do illegal abortions? I guess what the person is saying is, even though abortion is illegal, are there still physicians that are doing abortions, performing? Is that what this question is? Whoever answers? Okay, all right.
Well, I really don't know the answer to that, but I've had the privilege of knowing Dr. Curtis Boyd, who grew up in a little town in Texas. He was the smartest kid in that town, so he was expected to grow up and be a preacher, which he did. But then he went to medical school, and I think he wasn't an OB-GYN, but he was a family practice doctor. He went back to his little town, and he practiced mainly care for the elderly in his town. And the story goes that one day, a patient that he knew from town told him she was pregnant, and I forget the reasons why she didn't want to or couldn't continue her pregnancy, and she asked him for his help. And he said, I'm sorry, I really can't help you. And he tried to send her, at that time, I think you could go to New York or California, maybe Colorado, I'm not sure. But she couldn't afford to leave town. And it bothered him, and finally he agreed. And from then on, he provided abortion years before Roe, years before any of that in Texas was legal. And he was one of the founders of the National Abortion Federation. And I hope there is a qualified physician out there in Texas providing abortion and providing safe abortion. But I really don't know if that's true or not.
It's a great, I hope it's true. We are officially at the hour, and I just want to thank all of you so much for coming today. And our speakers, how lucky, how fortunate were we to have all of you here today. So please go to the back, talk to the folks at the tables, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.